Thank you for joining me on my soapbox today. My name is Mindy Prefling, and I'm the Client Services Senior Manager for Spencer Ogden, a global energy and infrastructure recruitment agency. As global recruitment experts in energy and infrastructure, we're building an industry that impacts millions. We provide leading recruitment services to our clients and candidates, creating careers to power a sustainable future. The SOapbox Series is a podcast that we've launched to have open discussions with thought leaders in the renewable energy industry to discuss the human element behind our industry and the challenges we face in recruiting, retaining, and promoting top talent, especially as it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion. My guest today is Anna Kimbrell. Anna is a partner at Husch Blackwell and leader of the firm's energy and natural resources team. She primarily represents developers and owners in the acquisition, development, funding, and financing of wind and solar projects across the country. She focuses half of her practice on project development, working with clients from early stage greenfield efforts through permitting, site design, landowner engagement, and local approvals to ready projects for construction and financing. The other half of her practice is devoted to transactional deal work, representing buyers, sellers, and sponsors in the acquisition, sale, financing, and investment of renewable energy projects. On today's episode, we'll be focusing largely on my favorite topic of diversity and inclusion, zoning in on the career development of women in law and renewables. We talk about how having a dream that's already pretty diverse attracts more diversity and how companies can position themselves as employers of choice when it comes to diverse candidates. Anna talks about her decision to pursue a career as a lawyer later in life and the challenges she's faced as a law school student with the baby at home. And we talk about why Anna believes that while over half of law school students are women, women make up far less than 50% of lawyers and even fewer reach partner level. I hope you enjoy. Well, Anna, thank you so much for joining me on my soapbox today. I'd love to kick us off with an introduction to you. Could you give us some background into your story?
Sure. Anna Kimbrell. I'm a partner, an equity partner at Husch Blackwell in the Kansas City office. I head our energy and natural resources group here at Husch Blackwell. I went back to school kind of late in life and went to law school and did my MBA and came to Husch Blackwell as a summer intern and then came here and really have been here ever since. Its focus on renewables is what brought me here and is what has made me stay.
Great. And what was the impetus for you to go back to law school later in life?
I've been working for a consulting firm for a number of years. I actually started with the MBA thinking, I really like consulting and I wanted to do consulting, but the group that I was working with, we did a lot of work with like city and municipal governments, and the bureaucracy was a lot. And so I thought at the time, well, I really like consulting. I like giving advice. I like kind of like seeing the problems and trying to help them with these tool sets. But maybe I'd like to do it more in the business, for-profit business context. I started with my MBA and it was great. I had never taken, finance or econ or even accounting. So in that sense, it was really challenging, but I got about, like 7 or 8 months into it and just felt like I wasn't quite getting these like hard skills that I wanted. I think at the time would not have been able to put this into words, but I wanted a trade. A family friend kind of turned me on to the idea of law school by saying, look, you don't have to be in a courtroom to be a lawyer. What most lay people think of when they think of lawyers is really, that's maybe half or less of the lawyers out there. And there's, business law and corporate law and real estate and all these transactional practices that really have nothing to do with litigation. So I kind of took a leap and applied to law school. I took the very last LSAT that I could take and still qualify for the dual program, which would let me do it in 4 years instead of 5, and got into KU law, where I was getting my MBA. And just, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but it was the most amazing thing for me at the time. It was like I got there and did a summer start program, and just remember sitting in for one of the first classes in the front row, just going, yes, this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted something that was just going to completely break me down and build me back up and teach me how to think and how to see things, and just sort of open this box of, it's just it kind of, you learn all the secrets of how things are run and how things work in this country, in a way that I don't know any other education really gives you. So I loved law school. And if you would have asked me when I went back to school, I knew I wanted to do transactional work. I was really interested in triple bottom line companies. I spent all my extra time researching, B Lab, everything that B Lab was doing, and the benefit corporation legislation that was starting to get adopted in various states, and wrote and published articles on it. So I knew I wanted to do something that had a social impact. And at the time, as people were starting to interview for jobs, I thought there's no way I would go to big law, because the idea is that you go into big law and you work for, some horrible, dirty company that you don't necessarily align with, but you make a lot of money and it's the golden handcuffs, and you just can't ever get out of it. And I wanted to do something that was much more social justice, or but really focused on this kind of intersection of social good and for-profit business. What I learned, though, fairly quickly was that Husch Blackwell had this growing renewable energy practice and it had just never occurred to me that was something that I could get mushed together, right? Like big law and renewable energy. So I came to the firm and did a summer internship, my first summer after my first year of law school. And it just blew my mind. It was like, this is exactly what I want to do. I don't want to do anything else but renewable energy. So I did my second summer, and then I came here right after I graduated in 2014.
Great. And okay, so you've been with Husch Blackwell since 2014. You started as an associate, or I guess rather an intern in some ways, while you were there. How long did it take you to get to partnership?
So I went from an associate to an equity partner in just over 5 years, which is not the typical, that's not the typical path.
Yeah. How long does it usually take?
Typically you go from associate to fixed income partner if you're going to go to partner. And that usually is like around 8 years, maybe 8 to 10. And then just, some partners never move to equity. Some stay at fixed for a while, and then once they build up their book of business, they move on to equity. I did progress really fast. And, it's really a tribute to the firm that a lot of law firms have this very lockstep program, right? It doesn't matter if you're blowing the roof off, you are going to make partner. You're not even eligible for partner until year 8 or year 9 or whatever it is. And, the firm really recognized that that would be holding me back, and we have adopted this, this value set of making people leaders when they're ready. And that has proven true through, making partner, but also taking over and leading the energy group.
Yeah. So with that fast track to equity partner, and even just going back to school later in life, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
I mean, when I went back to school, I had an 18-month-old kid. So juggling work and life and being a mother is just it's something that no matter how much help you have or how progressive your partner is, there's so much guilt every time you're not spending time with your kid or not being a mom. You're you feel guilty for not doing more, not being more. And that's something I think most women face, frankly.
Yeah.
But it really helped me, I think, in law school, because I treated law school and my, MBA as a job. It was like 8 a.m. I'm at the school. I work all day. I sit in the front row. I do not mess around. Like I've got a mortgage and a life that is used to having a 2-income household. And it's just rolling the dice and taking this huge risk by going back to school. So I was very, very serious student, which I think is the only way you really can be when you're 30 years old and have a family depending on you.
Yeah, you had everything to lose at that time.
Yeah, right. It is, I think sometimes, like, what would it have been like to go to law school at 22, like most people do? And I just don't think I would have been mature enough for it. I mean, it just, what I got out of law school and the business program going back in my 30s is just, you take advantage of every single opportunity, every networking opportunity. I mean, I just kind of killed myself, but every chance I got, I was researching something. I had opportunities to publish things, that weren't outside of the curriculum, but it's just, I knew after working for, 8+ years that there was you don't have those chances in the same way when you're in just working professionally. I mean, you do a little bit, you can do, postings and like industry papers and things like that, but you're so busy when you're working, right? And when you're working and trying to drum up business, you're looking for every networking opportunity. And when you're in school, it's just all right there for you, right? I mean, all those professors, all the contacts they had, every student that's gone through that, system, those are all open networking opportunities for you. And I just don't think I would have known how to or even recognize the value of taking advantage of those kinds of things when I was younger.
Yeah. What was it like? You were like being in such a different time in your life, being older and having a young family in law school when most of the other people in the organization, in law school were 22, 23 years old. Was that difficult? Just maybe feeling a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was sort of disorienting at first, like just you don't spend much time with people in that age group when you're 10 years older than them. But I did a summer start program through the law school, which was a really small, there were maybe 25 or so students that opted to do that. And it turned out that a lot of the students that opted to do that were older students, or on like kind of non-traditional paths to some extent, even if they just took a few years off. So I kind of had this core group of classmates that really were more of the non-traditional students. I think that helped a lot. But honestly, I wasn't, the social part of it is just so, when you're that hyper-focused and you're, kind of have everything on the line and you have all these competing personal priorities, it's just, the social aspect of law school is not the same as it would have been had I been in my 20s, I think, when I went through.
Yeah, I can imagine. What's the makeup of women to men in law school, or around about, if you don't know the exact number?
Yeah, I mean, it's more than 50-50. So there are more women in law school than men, I think, now. And that has been somewhat unique. That's been a recent development, I think. And, people go to law school for a lot of different reasons. And there are a lot of different professions, that or different things you can do with a law degree. Some people go into it and never actually like sit for the bar, or, they go into like JD preferred jobs. Things like financial planning and a lot of like finance work sometimes will be JD preferred, but won't require that you actually have a law license. Some people go work in public interest, some people work for the government, some people work for small firms, some people set up their own shops, which is terrifying to think about. And then some people go work for large law firms, I have, of my core group of girlfriends when I was in law school, one went to work for legal aid, one went to work for the state of Kansas doing like employment litigation, one went to work for a prosecutor's office, and the other went and worked doing like estates and trusts at a small firm. So
yeah,
they're just all across the board.
yeah, there's a lot of different career options than just going into a law firm. So with that, because you did go into working for a major law firm, do you have a sense of what the makeup of women to men is within law firms?
Yeah, I mean, I think that generally we do, as an industry, legal industry, it's usually about 50-50. I think right now our numbers are at the firm are a little bit lower, like 40-something women and 50-something men to start out. Sorry, that's like firm-wide. So we start out with pretty much parity, and sometimes even a few more women than men. The problem that the whole legal industry faces is that the number of women who make it to partner and then make it to equity partner is significantly lower.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, was how many are actually at partner level. So do you have an idea of why that is?
So people have a lot of different ideas about what it is. I think the thing that most commonly people say is, well, because childcare, they have kids and then they want to go to part-time, etc. When even when I was interning, I would have attorneys they say, oh, how old's your son? Oh, he's 3 years old. And they'd say, we have this great 80% program. You could stay on the partner track. And I was just always really taken aback by it. Like, wait, why would you think that I worked this hard to go? I didn't give you any indication I wanted to go 80%. I just said I have a young child.
Mm.
And I thought, there's no way that men get that same reaction. There's just no, So I think that we can create, we have these wonderful programs here for parental leave. They apply regardless, for the primary parent regardless. We do a lot to really promote work-life balance. And I was telling you before the interview, our linked office, which is a 100% virtual office, is our largest office at this point. But we can do all of that until the culture changes. It's never going to stop being just a woman's problem, right? So until you have male attorneys that are saying, when we had our child, I took 6 weeks off and stayed home, right? Because it was so important, and I unplugged, and it was just, until you have those stories kind of being told as the norm, it's really hard to see how it's going to shift in a real meaningful way.
Yeah, so when you say we need to see a change in our culture, do you mean like within the work culture or like our culture as Americans?
No, I mean, all of it would be great, but I mean, in our work culture, really, it's still, there is such an underlying assumption that women will bear the brunt of child care and child rearing and child responsibility, even in these super high echelons of professional, industries. There's no, men and women are treated differently, right? In that sense. And I think there's a lot of guilt associated with, I think women carry a lot of guilt to constantly having to walk that line between, if it's a zero-sum game, right? Like if you choose this, then you're sacrificing this. And if you choose this, then you're sacrificing that.
Yeah. So you mentioned that Husch Blackwell is doing some things to promote DE&I, one of which is just kind of making the workplace a little bit more approachable. What else is Husch Blackwell doing for DE&I?
So Husch Blackwell is somewhat unique in that we have a chief diversity officer. So Amanda Garcia Williams sits in the C-suite, and she is our chief diversity person for the entire firm. She's in every meeting, firm leadership meeting. She's in the executive board meeting. She's involved in, any committee or initiative before it gets voted on or before it gets final. She's weighing in on it. And has a team that she's now built out under her. So she's got, I think, 2 directors, and I might not have all the numbers right. And she's got people under that. I think she's got about a team of 9 now. So in a lot of ways, that has been it's been amazing having her since she started. Our strategic plan, we have 3 points to it, overarching points, and one of them is DE&I. It is in every single thing that we do, every single consideration. One of the things that she and her team have implemented since she's started, we now, every attorney, when we log into our kind of intranet, we have a hub and we have all these financial metrics, right? So it'll say, here's your client relationship manager credit numbers and your collections and your working attorney and all of that. We now have a diversity dashboard that's embedded in it, that's over in the kind of like top left-hand corner, that shows how many, if I'm the client relationship manager, CRM on a client, how many people do I have that I'm giving managing credit to that are women, that are underrepresented races, that are, LGBTQ, and it breaks it all out. So you can see it's the same with if I'm managing something, what about who are the working attorneys on it? And it's really, we aren't yet using it to make financial decisions, but it has created and spurred some of the best conversations in, our kind of the leadership meetings. And I think it's created a lot of awareness that people just, aren't always aware of their impact. And obviously that's a fairly, narrow version of impact, but it's been eye-opening. So we have a DE&I committee. We have, all of our DE&I associates have diverse mentors. There are quite a few initiatives. We actually today, they just released our DE&I strategic plan. It came out this morning, and so I was kind of hoping that I would have had a day or so to read it, so I could give you really good examples of what we're focusing on. But I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so I've been eagerly awaiting it coming out. So
that's okay. We can update when you have those numbers.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Well, and I guess
but so the strategic plan too is really just focused in certain areas, and the types of initiatives and things that are going to be implemented.
Well, it sounds like
firm-wide.
Yeah, it sounds like the firm has done a good job of creating awareness and bringing it to the forefront of everybody's mind by having the diversity dashboard. It's something that you visually see every day when you log on. And I think it's important that it's something that we always talk about, because it can be one of those hot button issues that comes up, and for a season it's really important and everybody talks about it, and then business as usual continues and it tends to get forgotten about again, especially when other issues come up, or when it comes to hiring, if you just don't have the time or energy or resources to focus on bringing in more diverse hires, for example.
Right. Yeah. And, so from the way that our firm is structured, we have 6 business units, and all of the attorneys are organized into those units except for brand new lawyers, associates. They have a couple years before they get sorted into one of the schools that sounds like Hogwarts. One of the industry groups. And so, each of us have our own kind of recruiting policies and strategic goals as well in terms of hiring. Our group, our Energy and Natural Resources group, is about 60 attorneys now, all over the country, really. And I I've been working with Amanda. We've been having conversations about recruiting and how we can really increase the number of diverse candidates that we're getting, both as laterals and right out of law school. And so one thing that she's said that I think is really interesting, and we're trying to kind of create, and not to give away all the secrets here, because I know everyone is out there trying to hire energy candidates, but is that diverse attorneys are more likely than non-diverse attorneys to go into jobs that have like a social justice aspect to them. And a lot of times that means nonprofits, it means government work, as opposed to law firms. And so, from our perspective, one of the things that I think is such a unique story, and this applies to the entire industry, renewable energy industry, is just, you can come to work for this big law firm and do nothing but wind, solar, battery storage, hydro, renewable energy day in, day out, and really feel like you're making a difference. It's true for, all these large companies too, is that there's this story, both, I think, generationally, a lot of the people coming out of college right now or out of law school right now are really want that. They want that, like, they want to feel like they're doing something positive for the world, and more so than even generations before.
I was on mute. Isn't that the reason that you did this, that you got into this yourself, was that intersection of social justice and corporate?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that there's probably a better, more forceful and story for us to be telling as we're trying to recruit. I mean, it's, this is your job, although not so much in the legal realm, but it is cutthroat out there right now. It is unbelievable. It's so hard to compete. Everyone, from the legal industry in particular, a lot of law firms are behind the ball in terms of developing out this renewable energy expertise, right? And so what they do then is want to try and go out and poach, right? Yeah. They want to they're like, oh, you guys have been doing this, we're going to grab this team. They come after associates that, they've been with us for a few years and they've got all this training and experience, and then they're like ripe for the taking. And it's been just, since stepping into this role, it's every week there's someone who's gotten an offer, or wants to, or is potentially thinking about leaving, or some former, attorney that's trying to pull people. It's a really, really competitive environment right now. And so I think it's even more, I guess, incumbent on us to be highlighting the parts of this that aren't just pure black and white financial, right? Because I think that our firm is very unique, and I think that this industry is so unique, and having a group that really knows this industry and has grown up professionally in this industry, it makes a huge difference. Well, in terms of just quality of life and quality of professional fulfillment, I guess.
Yeah, and you make a good point, because it's not just about how you recruit talent, diverse talent, but how do you retain diverse talent? And I guess that's where the equity and inclusive piece comes in, which can be harder to quantify, or maybe is just not as easy to talk about from a programmatic perspective, right, as diversity, for example.
Yeah, that's 100% it. The best way to recruit diverse talent is to have a diverse team, right? Period.
Yeah.
So it's so important to build a team and build that level, that loyalty, if you are going to be successful in attracting diverse, candidates.
So I think what's similar in terms of what we do is we both service the renewable energy industry. So we have probably some crossover with our clients. We've talked a little bit about how law firms are doing as it pertains to DE&I? How do you think renewable energy as an industry is doing?
I think that renewable energy as an industry is trying. It's the challenge with the industry as a whole outside of the legal world is that most of the people who are in energy generally and renewable energy come from engineering or finance, so backgrounds of some sort. And those two backgrounds are dominated by white men. So there's kind of this fundamental like chicken and egg issue of, engineering schools are still not graduating very many women. They're still not graduating they're struggling with diversity. It's the same with, finance careers, right? So you kind of get into this. I think that the companies that are doing the best have an international presence, is kind of my experience, because they get a lot more diversity because of, I think, their international draw. But so I get this in my bubble working with clients. I start to think, oh, wow, we're making these huge changes, PPAs, like we'll see like requests for proposals for offtake from Google and Amazon and Facebook and these, large corporate off-takers. And they require you submit not just like you check the box because you produce this green energy, this clean energy, right? But what are your workplace policies? How diverse is your team? They're asking all of these questions, which is really making people in the industry stop and think and really focus on diversity, which is great. What you realize though, so I recently went out to the InfoCast conference, and the InfoCast conference, the Wind and Solar Conference, is a very expensive conference. It's finance-focused conference. Companies tend to send their highest level executives out there, right? For law firms, tend to send more partners and people who have a lot of client contacts. It's probably one that's pretty expensive to send new associates out to. You walk into that conference and you are in a sea of men. It is shocking how many, and it's primarily white men, with the exception of some of the international companies. Like you have some companies that are headquartered in Asia, or you see a little bit of diversity, but it's just a sea of men in suits. It's shocking. It's just shocking. And then you take a step back and you realize the reason is because while there's diversity at these lower levels, and we're seeing increased diversity at lower levels, as you go up, it's not filtering up yet, right? I mean, I'm hopeful that means that the future is we're going to see these women who are at lower tiers in the hierarchy, work their way up, but it hasn't happened as quickly as I would have expected.
Well, yeah, it kind of comes back to the question that I asked you earlier of like, why aren't more women seeking the partnership track in law firms? But what can we do as an industry to promote more women into leadership roles so that these conferences like InfoCast aren't just white men or men?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if the childcare piece of it is the biggest piece, which I don't know if it is or not, frankly.
Yeah.
The answer in my mind is that you have to emphasize as an organization, and you have to frankly pressure men to take time off and to prioritize childcare, because otherwise there's no parity. You're never going to get to parity. It doesn't matter how many policies you put on the books. If men are saying, well, I mean, I know we have this 30 day, I get 30 days paternity leave, but I'll be still answering emails and I'll probably only take 10 days because I'll get bored. I mean, that as long as that culture persists, there's no chance of addressing that side of it, right? You've read all the literature too. I mean, women who have young children, are more productive, better with their time, et cetera, but they're viewed by their colleagues as less productive, more distracted, et cetera, which is just, it's not at all true, but it's a perception.
Yeah.
So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I do think that is one big piece of it. I think the more flexibility we give people, the better they, and recognize that people work differently. Different people work differently. The more successful I think that we're going to be in elevating all kinds of people, up. I think our firm's done a good job of taking steps in that direction, having the fully remote office, really promoting a lot of very progressive policies. But there's still just an enormous amount of work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Enormous. And it's sort of the same thing that we just talked about with, like, you have to have a diverse team in order to get a diverse team. Until you get used to seeing women, having women in the room, having, half say of the people making decisions being women or being, people of color, it's going to seem odd, right? Like, it's always going to seem as if they're just there. It's just a token. Like, we have women on the board. We have 2, on a 9-person board. It's like, but that's not okay. We're half the population, right? It's something that we spend hours and hours and hours and hours in every meeting talking about and trying to figure out. And I frankly don't know that it's one thing that causes women not to rise.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And then there's also just how we lift up women in our culture, and then how we develop women. Because I still think, at least in our generation, there's a disparity between how how boys are raised and how girls are raised. And that is what I see the most when I look around the room, in the industry, in both the recruitment industry and when I look in the renewable energy industry, is that I just think women weren't raised the same way. So we don't have the same confidence to go after the positions that men go after. So we get stuck in like middle management or just technical positions. And now it kind of seems like it's shifted a little bit, that women are encouraged into management roles or leadership positions that either, one, they don't feel qualified for, or they just don't want to be in, but they're being pushed into them because we're trying to push the agenda of getting more women into leadership positions. That's kind of the problem that I see, in addition to women tend to be the primary caregiver for children.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. I mean, women are less likely to ask for raises. They're less likely to be comfortable talking about money. They're more likely to do housekeeping type tasks in a business setting than men, right? You go into a meeting and there's 4 men and 1 woman. The woman's more likely to be the one taking notes and organizing the agenda. It's just, women have been brought up it's just this line that you're constantly walking to, right? Whereas men can be very assertive, be aggressive, and it's seen as a positive thing. Women in that, acting the same way are seen as, it's seen very negatively and very off-putting. It's something that, in our group, we work with a lot of men, because the industry has a lot of men, a lot of engineers, a lot of very strong personalities. And one of the things I spend a lot of time working on with associates that makes me absolutely crazy is, young female associates struggle a lot of times with male clients. They talk over them, they steamroll them, they feel like they're having to repeat themselves, they feel like they're not being listened to when they're, and what we end up doing is I have to talk to them about how they can change their behavior. They can change the way that they act. They can be more assertive, aggressive, rude in a conversation to get their point across. And it works, but it also is just infuriating. Why do we have to change the way that, we're being polite? And in any other context, it wouldn't be seen as a negative. You wouldn't be taken advantage of, I guess, in the conversation. But in these with really aggressive men, you just sort of feel like you're getting overwhelmed and steamrolled. And so we adopt these really impolite, rude, and aggressive and assertive kinds of personality traits in order to be heard by men. And I'm not sure that that's really where we want to be going, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, it's not all men, it's not all, it's just, but it happens enough over and over again. And every time I'm counseling a young female associate on, here's the way to interrupt, here's the way to speak a little bit louder or more assertive, or don't use these words, use these words, it rankles, right? Because we shouldn't be having to change our behavior from a polite, cooperative manner to a aggressive, non-cooperative way of doing things. But sometimes it's the only way to get through it.
Yeah. I know what you mean. We have kind of similar communication styles in the industry, in recruitment, in the industry that I work in. And it is too bad that this is like how we have to adapt our behaviors. Like, why can't we just learn how to communicate better as adults?
Yeah, right. I agree completely.
So why are we talking about DE&I? Why is this important?
Well, let me answer that from just as a lawyer, and then we can talk about renewables. Lawyers are inherently problem solvers. We don't get asked the really simple answers, right? Questions that have really simple, obvious answers. Everybody's got Google. Right? You can figure out the really black and white, here's what the law says type answers. Our job is to think creatively, think outside the box, really understand the complexities of the industry and these projects and how all of it comes together, those competing priorities and all the different parties that come into these projects as we're building them, and understand the clients, right? And that level of complex thinking is not, frankly, it's just not attainable if you have a homogenous group of people who all have the same experience, who've all, gone through the same lived experience. So there's nothing that can create better lawyers in my mind than a really diverse team. From a renewable energy perspective, it's kind of embarrassing that we are in this incredibly progressive, cutting edge, young industry, and we're still struggling with diversity, right? It just seems like if there's anywhere that should just be a magnet for diversity, that should have more diversity than any other industry, it's renewables. And I still think we're struggling.
Mm-hmm. We are. And I think it's something that we have a really big opportunity right now, given how much demand there is for new talent, to bring in diverse hires and to encourage at a college level more diverse applicants to pursue careers in renewable energy and show that we are a progressive and diverse industry.
Yeah, I agree. I was just out to lunch with two attorneys in my group. We were talking about whether, there's you might even know the answer to this. There's RISE, but is there a group that's solely focused on DE&I within renewables? I
No.
didn't know the answer to it at lunch.
I think Rise is the only one.
Yeah, I do too. So there's probably a lot of room for some organization and real thoughtful kind of approach to how we're addressing DE&I specifically in renewables, industry-wide, right?
Yeah.
Similar to the way that Rise has done that. And I know Rise really has expanded their focus to not just be women in renewable energy, but to,
Right.
focus beyond that. But
yeah, but I agree with you. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity, or a lot more opportunity for us to narrow in on this topic. And Rise does a great job, but it also takes effort for individuals like you and me to participate in that. And it is an inclusive group, but it tends to be women and ethnically diverse people who participate, not the people who we really need to hear the message and to see the problem.
Right. Yeah, that's always been my biggest complaint about women's groups in general, even like in the university context or whatever, is that you have these women's groups and then you have these speakers come in and they're talking about, issues in the workplace and gender parity and all. And I just always think, I'm not the one who needs to hear this. I know this. I live it every
You're preaching
day,
to the choir.
Yeah. So, the thing that makes the biggest difference in my mind are white men who take DE&I and they talk about it, and maybe they stumble through it, and but people listen. I mean, men listen. So they it's kind of shocking. I could say the same thing, and I don't think it would be heard in the same way as we have this just lovely office managing partner in Kansas City who's really very involved with communities, really involved with social justice issues. And he takes the time on meetings to talk about issues like George Floyd, things that are happening in the community, things in a way that I just think we need. Every time I hear him talk, I think, God, we need more of this, because it's really authentic. One, you can tell he's really passionate about it, but also I just think that you have to have a not to overuse the word, diverse voices talking about this stuff in order for people to really listen and for it to resonate.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So in the kind of in wrapping up our episode together, I always ask my guests a question, the what's in it for me. So it sounds like Husch Blackwell has done a good job of maintaining parity, and even at the partner level, they've worked really hard. Maybe not as much parity, but I'm curious, given that Husch Blackwell is probably recruiting like everyone else is right now, and though a lot of your folks you bring in out of law school, why should someone consider working at Husch Blackwell?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that Husch Blackwell is so unique, and it's unique in a way that's really difficult to sort of encapsulate and explain, but I'm going to try my best to explain it. So the way that we became a large, we're an Am Law 100 firm by revenue. So that means we're one of the top 100 firms in the country. We're about 850 attorneys nationwide. The way that we've grown, there was two regional Midwestern firms that merged together and probably got us to, my numbers will be off, but maybe 400 attorneys when that merger happened. Since then, we have continued to merge with small regional firms, as opposed to, merging with another large firm or getting kind of swallowed up by another large firm. So we've really somewhat organically grown to that and still maintained our culture, which is very kind of rooted in Midwestern values, and there's a work-life balance and just this culture of kindness. I mean, it sounds kind of overly fluffy, but I think it's true. We struggle a lot as we've gotten bigger with not wanting to kind of sacrifice our soul, frankly, right? How do we make sure that this is somewhere that people really feel connected, feel like a community, want to be, how do we, become this huge firm, but not burn out our associates, not not just demand and expect so much. And it's a fine balance to get there. But taking this position has put me in the room with all of the firm leaders. And the first big meeting was like a partner compensation meeting. It goes all weekend and talk through every single partner in the firm, and you work through compensation. I left there, you just aren't sure what it's gonna be when you're at the table, right? You don't know what the conversations are gonna be like. I didn't know if I would leave there thinking, oh, just disgusted by, like, I have this idea of the firm and it's just not that at all. I left there so like energized and hoorah, Husch Blackwell, because we're doing exactly what we should be doing. Really, really taking the time and having the discussions and, the initiatives and the things that we're changing and the things that we're focusing on that really, really matter to the people who work here, in a way I think that preserves our culture, that will preserve our culture no matter how fast we grow, frankly. And having this huge renewable energy team and energy group generally is probably another example of how progressively forward thinking, I guess, the firm is.
Great. Well, thank you, Anna. That's all the questions that I have for you today. I really appreciate you taking the time and participating and joining me on my soapbox. I've really enjoyed getting to know you a bit more.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really, really fun.